I'm Connor Rebush, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. I am your enduring host, Connor Rebush, joined by my co-host, who is hopefully recovering from seeing UFC 199 live, Patrick Wyman. Are you feeling okay now, a day removed from the event, Pat?
Never drinking again. Never. I'm done. I'm through. I was miserable yesterday. I'm on the wrong side of 30, and this is, never again. Never again. My throat feels like somebody took a wire brush and just brushed the whole thing out. This is a day and a half afterwards.
Good Lord. Hey, age is just a number, okay? Michael Bisping proved
it's not.
that.
It's
Dan
not
Henderson,
at all just a number.
Dan Henderson
that's a
proved
lie.
that.
That's a total lie. Anybody who tells you that is trying to sell you something.
In the case of fighters, usually trying to sell you themselves. Of course, Michael Bisping was not selling a false bill of goods. Nobody saw that coming. We had and we can revisit a discussion that we had last week and talk about how that affects what happened. But, like even me saying stuff about how I don't have as high an opinion of Rockhold's technical game as you do, but both of us think he's very good. Both of us were pretty sure he was the next big thing in this division. I still don't see Jacare Souza beating him. I wouldn't pick Michael Bisping in a rematch. I think Chris Weidman has a very tall order in beating him. He's a very tough fighter. Nobody saw Michael Bisping knocking him out in the first round. It was a literal impossibility to predict.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to... This is taking nothing away from Bisping's performance because Bisping did a lot of really interesting things here. He also got lucky. And come at me, bros, if you want to have another discussion about luck and chance in MMA.
Yeah, if we talk about that, it'll be like the Uriah Hall fluke kick thing that we discussed several episodes ago when he knocked out Gegard Mousasi. There is an element of luck in everything. The fact that Michael Bisping scored a knockout punch in the first round, that he actually put somebody out cold for the first time since his sixth professional fight in 2005. His fifth professional fight in 2004, actually. That is unusual, especially when it's Luke Rockhold, who, yes, he's been knocked out 3 times in the first round, so maybe he has a weakness for that kind of thing, but also he's not fragile. He's not easy to put away.
The last time he got knocked out, it took a flush spinning wheel kick from a roided up Vitor Belfort, plus a barrage of follow-up punches, and he still wasn't completely out.
And let's be honest, even Vitor Belfort, post-TRT and with below-average testosterone levels, is probably the harder hitter strike for strike than Michael Bisping.
That's not even. They're not in the same stratosphere even after that.
Yeah, but I want to say I think Michael Bisping fought a pretty brilliant fight, and the fact that he could fight a brilliant fight was never a surprise to me. The thing that we talked about last week was. The reason that you and I ended up having a sort of a heated discussion about it is that I was trying to say that Michael Bisping, from a technical perspective, has a lot to offer. But against a guy like Luke Rockhold, who's so dynamic, in addition to being a very skilled fighter, he would have to fight a perfect fight to beat him. Now, typically when we say a perfect fight, we mean 5 rounds of not getting hit and outscoring your opponent. A perfect fight can also be a first-round knockout in which you don't absorb much damage in the process. And that's what Michael Bisping did. He fought a very calculated fight. He knew that he wanted that left hook. He found a number of ways to set it up. He threw it both coming forward and off the counter. And he figured out that Rockhold would give him the outside angle. He figured out that he could counter Rockhold overcommitting. He figured out that Rockhold would retreat in straight lines. So he really put that knockout together. Even if it happened in the first round, I wouldn't call it one of those. It wasn't Dos Santos Velasquez, where it was like a single shot that came out of nowhere. You could clearly see Michael Bisping looking for that punch and making little adjustments to make sure that he could find it.
Yes, all of that is true. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me about this fight was his willingness to hang in there and counter.
Yeah.
Which was not something that he showed in their first matchup. And it's frankly not something he showed a lot of in general until the Anderson Silva fight.
Yeah, and some in the CB Dalloway fight. It's a recent development.
Yeah, I mean, but even in even in the Dalloway fight, he was much more inclined to maybe throw one shot and then get back out.
Yeah.
Like this was Bisping discovering that he could exchange in layers with Luke
Yeah.
Rockhold, and it's the same thing that he discovered against Anderson Silva. He didn't need to be that, he would take his chances in those kinds of exchanges. Like now in the long run, like if you were to run this back, and why I say that this was lucky is because if you were to run this back 10 times, how often is it Bisping who lands the knockout shot on Rockhold versus the other way around?
And that's why I couldn't pick him. Like I know if well, I don't want to get into the argument we had, although I think we ended up kind of agreeing. We understood what each other was trying to say. But if neither guy was a power puncher, then Michael Bisping could absolutely outpoint Luke Rockhold, and Luke Rockhold could actually, fighting the correct fight, outpoint Michael Bisping. But
yes,
given the fact that there is physicality to mixed martial arts and combat sports, that knockout blows happen and that power matters, I would have to say it would be Luke Rockhold being the one to land that first really big, meaningful shot 9 times out of 10.
Well, and he landed a bunch on Bisping. They just didn't put Bisping out. Like he landed at the end of the between 3 and 2 minutes of the fight at the 2:02 mark. He lands a flush right hook right on Bisping's
right
temple.
Before the knockout.
It's a shot that puts down most guys, and it's a shot that Rockhold has put guys down with before. So the point that I'm trying to get at is like Rockhold was not fighting irrationally. Rockhold's mistakes were in overcommitting to particular shots. He overcommitted to his jab a couple of times. Like when Bisping finally caught him at the end with the miss straight right and then the left hook, that was Rockhold had left him himself out of position before. Like 3 times he had done it.
Yeah. Twice
with jabs and once with a right hook.
He almost turns his back when he's retreating. He's in this complete side stance. He utterly gives up that angle. And I think actually that the fact against both Silva and Rockhold, the fact that Bisping was more willing to engage in layers and to hit somebody, evade their counter, and continue hitting them, I think that's a pretty brilliant adjustment for his style against both of those guys. Because exchanging combos in the pocket has never been what Anderson Silva is best at, and it's certainly not what Luke Rockhold is best at. And it makes a lot more sense than hanging around at long range against either guy, especially when you kind of get the feeling that you can throw more volume than them, and that you're going to wear on them by forcing the action rather than the other way around.
But that's the thing. I think that was a rational move for Bisping, but at the same time, it was still rational for Rockhold to get into those exchanges because he's so much bigger and hits so much harder.
Yeah, he's got to imagine that he's going to be the more impactful guy. That's the thing. It's like, how do you go into this fight as Luke Rockhold thinking, all right, I can't exchange with him? Like, of course you're going to think you can exchange with him. It's Michael Bisping.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is, like, this was perfectly rational for both guys. Like, Bisping fought a brilliant fight, but I thought Rockhold was actually doing some really good things and had sharpened some things up too. He'd sharpened up his straight left. His head movement looked a little bit better, even if it was predictable, and Bisping played off that. Mm-hmm. Like Bisping, so the first 2 straight rights Bisping throws in the fight, Rockhold slips them easily. After that, Bisping started to bait it just a little bit and then put the straight right where he knew Rockhold's head was going to slip to. Yeah. He didn't land a ton of them, but it was a nice crafty little thing. And even if that wasn't the money shot, he had figured out how Rockhold was going to lean in the pocket, and that's partially what allowed him to land the left hook.
Yeah, and you kind of get the sense that he went into that fight knowing that Rockhold was going to see that straight right coming, and that the left hook behind it would be the real would be the difficult shot for him to avoid anyway, which is just kind of the case in open stance fights in general. Maybe we can talk about this because. It's Luke Rockhold's best punch is what Michael Bisping used to knock Luke Rockhold out. Michael Bisping has for most of his career been a classical British style boxer. He's had a 1-2 and that's been mostly it. Apparently he's left-handed. This is what I'm being told. But for most of his career it's been a jab and a right hand and not much of a left hook. I don't think he's had the mechanics for it to know how to throw it with power. And I think also because he wasn't a great defensive fighter in his early going, he probably felt uncomfortable throwing the hook. He felt like it left him exposed. But he has developed it recently. For Luke Rockhold, it's kind of been his go-to punch for years and years now. And I think he throws it for the same reason that Michael Bisping thought it would be a good shot. Because when you have an orthodox fighter and a southpaw fighter facing off, when you have an open stance matchup, The right hand or the left hand for the southpaw is the one that everyone goes for. All conventional wisdom says that you step to the outside angle and you throw the cross. It's the easiest movement to do. But the thing is the cross, even if it's more easily lined up than the jab, it's still the furthest possible weapon from your target. Even if you get that outside angle, you line it up nice, the guy has more time to see that shot coming than any other shot in your arsenal, except perhaps like a head kick from the rear leg or something. So relying on that, especially against a guy like Luke Rockhold, who fights with his head pulled back already, who's very tall and long, and who's light on his feet, is kind of madness. And so I kind of love the fact that Michael Bisping seemed to rely on Rockhold's ability to get away from that right hand, because Rockhold's fought so many Orthodox fighters who just try to hit him over and over with the right hand. And
that's exactly what Weidman tried to do to him over and over and over again.
And he has outgamed them like he did to Weidman with the right hook, because it's such a sneaky shot in an open stance fight. If anyone's ever sparred with a southpaw, or if you're a southpaw, I'm sure you spar with Orthodox fighters, it can be very difficult to see that hook coming over your own shoulder because of the way your body's arranged, especially if you're Rockhold and you pull your head back, you like to tuck your chin behind that lead shoulder. That shot arcs up over, and you really don't see it until it's 6 inches from your chin. You have to predict it from body motion. You have to see it coming.
And partially so the other part of what makes it so dangerous for Rockhold is because his arms are so long. He excels at not just landing it on your chin, but landing it right on your ear, on your temple and ear. So it makes it even harder to see the shot coming than one that was trying to clip you right on the sweet spot of the jaw would.
Yeah.
And Rockhold makes his hay by landing that shot from your ear and back.
Yeah, and Bisping's was actually to counter that was right across the chin as Rockhold stood up too tall. And that's the thing, Rockhold is he's not a perfect defensive fighter in particular. He's not a perfect striker, nor is Michael Bisping. But I just like the fact that it's fun to see a fight where it felt kind of like actual depth of skill was the most deciding factor. It kind of felt like a guy who just had more tools and a little more flexibility with those tools is what got the win. Because normally it's not as important as like a technique geek like me would want it to be. I would love it if you could just go in there and know a lot about fighting and be a smart fighter and get wins. But you need to be durable, and you need to be strong and fast. You need to complement all of that skill with if you're going to be a top fighter, you need to be a top athlete too. And so it was just kind of fun. I'm sure you enjoyed the hell out of it live. Like, I don't care who you were rooting for in that fight. That was easily, in my mind, that was the second biggest upset in UFC history after GSP Sarah.
And I think Holm Rousey has to be up there too, right?
Yeah, but even then, I think even you and I thought, okay, Holm can make this an ugly fight. We didn't expect Rousey to be that flummoxed, but we certainly thought that Holm had a style to at least survive. I didn't think Michael Bisping could survive Luke Rockhold. I didn't think he would make it through the fight. I thought that Rousey might end up beating Holm in the 4th round or by decision. I didn't think that Michael Bisping would go the distance, either winning or losing.
Yeah, I'm with that. Like, the thing that so you love the depth of skill aspect to it. I love the fact that both guys fought a perfectly rational fight. Neither guy made a lot of mistakes. Rockhold made 3 mistakes in the entire fight, one of which cost him. I like the fact that both guys were doing what they should have been doing, and still the guy who wasn't supposed to win won. Yeah. Because that's probability. That's how this is supposed to work. That if you run this enough times, eventually unexpected outcomes are going to happen, even if you feel like you're in control of all of those variables.
Yeah.
I think we understood how this fight could and would play out. Maybe we underestimated Bisping in the pocket just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Maybe overestimated Rockhold's ability to take a shot. But the basic understanding of the fight was perfect. Like, we understood what was going to happen if this got into the pocket. Like, Rockhold was the more accomplished fighter in the pocket over the course of this fight. Like, he landed better and more damaging shots in those exchanges.
I think they were pretty even for volume, but he did seem to be landing with more impact.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Bisping had to throw numbers to get his shots to land his shots.
Yeah, and even then, credit to Rockhold that Bisping wasn't running away with the numbers. I'm pretty sure he ended the fight having landed 4 or 5 strikes, significant strikes, according to statistics. I don't put much stock in them, but he landed 4 or 5 more than Rockhold, and that, if you think about it, that accounts for the finishing sequence.
Yeah, they were exactly even in strikes until the finishing sequence.
Yeah. which was 5 big shots. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you told me if you told me that with a minute and 35 seconds left in the first round, they would be even in strikes, that wouldn't have surprised me. If you then told me the next thing that happened that Bisping was going to land a pair of flush left hooks and then a sequence of ground strikes to finish the fight, that was the surprising.
Yes, yeah, and that's what I was trying to say last week is that you put these guys in a technique versus technique matchup. I think they're both going to be fairly evenly matched. I think both of them have different things to offer. It's just that, like, how can you ever expect Michael Bisping to be the guy who lands the fight-changing one? It's just not. That just doesn't happen. It's and you know what? This isn't fight analysis, but I think it really, really annoys Luke Rockhold that it was Michael Bisping who did this to him. I mean, I think
if it had been Weidman, I don't think it would have bothered him all that much.
No, and I don't think he didn't like Vitor Belfort and the TRT and everything, but I think they were okay leading up to their fight. He hates Michael Bisping so much.
Despises him. Despises the ground that he walks on.
And Luke Rockhold tried so hard at the post-fight press conference to be he tried for about 3 minutes to be a gracious loser.
Bisping wouldn't let him.
Bisping would not let him.
That's the best part about all of that.
He would not let him. He would not stop. Which, if you're Michael Bisping and you're looking forward to a rematch, kind of makes sense. Because
this is A+ promotional material.
Oh yeah,
we're going to get Bisping Rockhold 3 is going to fucking rule.
Oh yeah,
in the lead up to that fight.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I'm looking forward to that. I will pick Rockhold in that rematch. Because I think Rockhold will always be the rational pick in this matchup.
Yeah.
But the fact that this happened, I don't want this to be seen as taking away from Michael Bisping, because it's not, because he fought a perfectly rational fight. Like, he knew exactly what he was supposed to do, and he did it. Just the chance of that working against Luke Rockhold was not that high. The fact that it did takes nothing away from him. It's just that, man, that is just an improbable series of things to happen.
I do think, to complement that, though, we should just give a little shine to Michael Bisping's improvements in the last few years, and particularly give some credit to Jason Perillo, who we talked about in relation to Cristiane Justino Cyborg Justino. We talked about Cyborg's boxing improvements under Perillo. She has developed some really nice footwork. She's gotten a lot better defensively and tightened up her combination punching and her process. Michael Bisping has absolutely done the same. He has been the striker that he is for a long time, style-wise. But technically, I really do think he is operating in the best form of his entire career right now.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if you've seen this GIF, Connor, but Perillo's reaction in the corner.
Oh, it's great.
It's literally the greatest corner reaction I've ever seen. It is perfect.
It was a man who it was the only man in the world who fully expected Michael Bisping to knock out Luke Rockhold.
It's wonderful. It's to our listeners, if you have not seen this, track it down.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing. But yeah, I mean, all credit to Perillo, all credit to Bisping. This is what makes this sport awesome. Is the fact that things like this, even improbable things, can happen. Even when you understand the dynamics of the fight perfectly, sometimes crazy shit is going to go down. Like, that's amazing. What a time to be alive, man.
What a time to be alive. And it feels so deserved. Bisping is still a dick, which is why I said the other day I would have been okay with him losing. I wouldn't have been that broken up about it. I felt like it was a Lifetime Achievement Award that he got this. I think that's what you said on the show. But now you can throw that Lifetime Achievement Award in the trash, and it feels well-deserved, because Bisping has been such a gamer for so long. And he has, mostly because of a physical disparity, and not often a lack of technique, has fallen short every time he's faced those top half of the top 10 middleweight athletes. And, he did it. So, what do you think, by the way, of him talking about his training camp? He says that he said going into this fight that he always overtrains, and that he always comes in having peaked and then lost his peak because he works so hard in the gym, and that he felt like he benefited from a 2-week camp. Do you think that's believable to you at all?
It's not for most fighters. I would say no, but I believe it for Bisping. That, just knowing how hard that guy works, that's entirely possible. But I don't know. I think it's always interesting when guys talk about that. As analysts, I think it's really hard for us to place any sort of predictive value on that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
if that makes any sense.
We'd have to be in the gym
thing.
from one fight to the next and evaluate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common enough thing or common enough refrain that we hear from older fighters. Though it's like, I had to learn how to take it easier on myself. I had to learn how to dial it back. Like we talked about that with Dominic Cruz. We talked about that with Brian Stan when we had Brian Stan on, about not needing to go so hard and about learning that you don't have to go 100% all the time. We talked a little bit about that with Brandon Gibson too, if memory serves.
I think we talked a bit about it with Tyron Woodley too.
Yeah, you just don't like. It doesn't surprise me that it's taken Michael Bisping until he's 37 to figure that out, though, because he's a bullheaded dude
who's pig-headed.
Who probably thinks he can work his way out of whatever.
Yeah, but that's kind of why he's such an inspiring figure. I know. Last week you kind of indicated that it was kind of a trite narrative, and it is. We've heard it a lot. It's cliched at this point, but it is still blue collar hard worker Michael Bisping, and that feels good. I'm okay buying into the completely surface level narrative of hard worker Bisping versus super athlete Luke Rockhold, even if it doesn't really give a full picture of the fight. It feels good to believe it, so I'm going with it. We have a couple other things to discuss on today's episode. Of course, I'm sure Bisping Rockhold will rear its head a few more times over the course of the broadcast because I'm still reeling from it. When I watched it, I just started telling random people what had just happened on my laptop. I'm sure I came across like a crazy man who badly needed a fix of some kind. But we have a couple other things to discuss. Of course, Dominic Cruz defending his bantamweight title in a rubber match against Uriah Faber. We've got Max Holloway versus Ricardo Lamas. Poirier versus Green. We've got Henderson versus Lombard. There's all kinds of crazy shit that happened on this card. And then at the end of today's show, we wanted to spend just a little time talking about the technical and strategic elements that made Muhammad Ali such a great fighter. For those of you, those few people out there who don't know, Muhammad Ali passed away, 74 years old, I believe, on the 4th, 2 days ago, or maybe the morning of the 5th. And so UFC 199 was a very pleasant way for me to end what was a weird day. Because I normally don't feel that much impact from celebrity deaths, but it really bummed me out when Ali died. So we're gonna spend a little time commemorating him in the best way we know how, which is to talk about his boxing. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll move on to Cruz, Faber, and all of that stuff I just mentioned coming shortly after that. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And we are back. Pat, speaking of another fight in which the power dynamic was not as expected, Dominic Cruz made his first title defense of his second title reign against Uriah Faber in a rubber match. I think most of us expected it to be fairly one-sided, which it was. And most of us expected that to win, Uriah Faber would have to finish Dominic Cruz, and that, of course, Uriah Faber is probably the more likely guy to land a shot like that, though I don't think any of us saw it happening. Dominic Cruz came pretty close to finishing Uriah Faber twice with strikes, quite close, actually, in the 4th round, and he landed a stunning knockdown with the left hand in the 2nd. Do you think this performance was markedly different from what you expected, considering how aggressive Cruz was and how determined he seemed to be to hurt Uriah Faber?
No, it wasn't. It was not particularly surprising to me. I think we had this conversation on last week's show, and I think you pointed out, Connor, that you think Cruz. If I'm misrepresenting you, let me know. But I thought this was something that you said at that point, that you think Cruz is much better as a stick and move outside guy. You think he's much better letting guys come to him and counter than he is at going after guys. Is that right? Or am I confusing you with somebody else?
I think I would say that, sure.
Yeah. So, but I think
not necessarily letting him coming at him, but an outfighter, like a fight where the guy's flummoxed and they're both picking shots at range.
Yeah, so I think that what we saw in this fight was Cruz learning how to use his footwork more effectively than ever to come after guys.
Yeah, for sure.
And learning when and where he can feel more comfortable and calm actually sitting down and throwing, and that's why he hurt Faber, because in the past where he would have immediately or where he would have been throwing those shots on the move without his feet under him. Now he was like, okay, I know where I'm safe. I know where I can plant and throw. And that's how he caught Faber, I thought.
Yeah, he
was
used
just
to
an
kinda,
increased level of comfort.
He used to kind of throw away the punches even when he was landing them. He would kind of pull them because he was trying to get away or take an angle even before the punch connected. He knew it was going to connect. He just wanted to flick you with it. He's much better than before of committing to the punch and knowing when he's safe to do so. Not like Luke Rockhold overextending on a jab coming into the pocket and then having to kind of desperately retreat, but just sort of very casually. I mean, Dominic Cruz still has a weird boxing style. He doesn't. To paraphrase Joe Rogan or Mike Goldberg, he doesn't fight the way you teach a young fighter to fight in terms of his punching mechanics. Weird winging shots that he likes to throw, but he throws them way better than ever before. Way better than ever before. His jab was a thing of beauty in this fight as well, by the way.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if his improvements as a puncher have to do with the improvements that we've seen from him as a counter puncher. That it's just like his timing is so much better in general. Maybe, that he understands spacing and distance even better than he did before. So now he can pick those spots and say, okay, I know I'm going to be relatively safe here to plant and throw.
Yeah, it seemed that way with his jab too. I don't recall him being that casually accurate with the jab in their second fight or in their first fight or really in any other matchup he's had. Faber, of course, is not a great defensive fighter, but he moves well. He's still very quick despite his age. And Cruz was, dare I say, Ali-esque in how he threw those jabs out there in such unpredictable ways, constantly breaking the rhythm and throwing it when he looked like he was out of range and kind of willfully putting himself off balance just a bit to cover those extra few inches and connect. And then there were a lot of weird dynamics in this fight to me. I expected Faber to be the more decisive puncher, even if I didn't expect him to land much. And it was Cruz who landed the more decisive shots. I expected Faber to give Cruz a little difficulty because he likes to hang back and counter rather than trying to pick a spot. He likes to. In their last fight, he let Cruz throw first a lot, and that was how he managed to get those knockdowns he got. Instead, it was Uriah Faber trying to pressure early, and then Dominic Cruz pressuring the hell out of him as the fight went on. And you know what thing that really struck me as odd? In the post-fight interview, Uriah Faber said they didn't expect Dominic Cruz to wrestle with him early, which, A, I don't know why you wouldn't expect that, because Dominic Cruz wrestles everyone. But B, that was Uriah Faber's best round. So I don't know what he actually planned for, because if that was the round he won on one of the scorecards and a lot of others online. So if that was what happened when he didn't expect what was going on, what was he hoping would happen in the rest of the fight?
Yeah, well, so I don't know if you recall hearing this wonderful bit of corner commentary from Justin Buchholz.
Tiger style?
Well, not just Tiger style, but we can talk about that if we want to. But where he said he spent his whole camp working footwork. He hasn't been training to grapple. Like
what?
Whether that was just a bit of psychology on his part, which is possible, though I'm not going to overrate the chance of that. If that was really what they thought was going to happen here, that's probably the dumbest thing anybody prepping somebody for a title fight has genuinely thought going in recent memory that I can think.
If that's true, by the way, credit to Uriah Faber because he grappled pretty competitively.
Yeah, well, I think he thought that was where he was going to have an edge. But he didn't have an edge on Cruz the last time they fought. What does he think Cruz has been doing since then? Just not grappling at all? Like
Cruz's whole thing is that he is a wrestler who boxes very well.
I mean, he saw him, if he watched the film, he saw him scrambling and grappling well with TJ Dillashaw,
sure,
who is I think, a pretty comparable, if not slightly more technically sound all-around grappler in transitions than Faber is.
Sure, I think probably that those takedowns that he landed on Dillashaw may very well have been the difference maker on the two of those judges' scorecards.
They were the first takedowns that anybody has landed on TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah,
Dillashaw had perfect takedown defense before that.
Yeah, and he landed quite a few of them. I wouldn't be surprised to see Dominic Cruz take down Renan Barão or Jose Aldo either. I don't know what's going on at Alpha Male. I'm so torn now, Pat, between trying to give Uriah Faber credit for being a remarkable old fighter. 37 years old in the bantamweight division is like 50 at heavyweight. It's very old for a small fighter. and for having such an impressive career and for still consistently being a top bantamweight in what is increasingly becoming a very deep and very dangerous division. But I'm constantly and repeatedly baffled by what Uriah Faber and his people planned for coming into fights. I just don't know what he expected to happen against Dominic Cruz. It's Dominic Cruz. The pressure, I'm sure, was a surprise, but even then, like, you know what this guy does. You fought him twice before.
Well, you would think. I mean, but maybe Cruz was just absolutely accurate in his assessment of Uriah Faber. Have we considered this possibility? Cruz said before the fight, Faber's ego is his biggest enemy because he never learns from anything that goes wrong. That he can't admit to himself that he has somehow screwed up or that he wasn't right, and so it's really hard to grow if that's your attitude. That's what Cruz said. I think that in some ways Cruz was trying to get under Faber's skin. He was trying to troll. He was trying to come up with some good lines of pre-fight hype. But maybe he's also just correct about that. Like, maybe that was just a perfect psychological read of a guy that he spent hours and hours and hours jabbing with over the years.
Well,
both in the cage and out.
He quite aptly called out Faber for promoting his team because he makes money off of them. In addition to the fact that he sees them as friends and everything. So I think Cruz is fairly sharp with his assessments. That does not sound like a bad. I didn't hear that in the lead up, but that kind of makes sense to me. I think Uriah and his team all made little improvements in different ways under Dwayne Ludwig, and Faber didn't like it. So maybe he didn't like the fact that someone was telling him he had to improve.
That's entirely possible. But, I mean, not to be too harsh on Faber, because this was never a matchup that favored him in any reasonable way.
It was a money matchup. This was the same as Bisping. I mean, we talked about this. I'm sure all the pre-fight stuff you and I both did constantly included mentions of, boy, these co-main and main events are disappointing because they're predictable. And the rest of the card is not. The rest of the card's pretty fun, and the last two fights are predictable ones that are really just there for casual fan appeal. That ended up, of course, not being true with Michael Bisping and Luke Rockhold, and that was what made it so much fun to experience live. But for Uriah Faber, I think the assessment was pretty square. There's nothing wrong with him not being able to compete with Dominic Cruz at this point. How old's Cruz? He's 30?
31.
He's so much younger than Faber. I mean, even given the injuries and everything, that in the end, that might have even helped Dominic Cruz, because Faber's been fighting at a ridiculous schedule still for the last 5 years. So, there's no shame in not being able to do that. It was what it was. I thought. Let's talk about the different technical things that we saw in the fight. Besides Tiger Style, I'm not sure how much assessment there is to give to Tiger Style. Dominic Cruz, I thought, did a really fantastic job of because again, so loopy and seemingly hittable. Sometimes when he throws himself into his shots, I thought all of that was very clearly calculated, and I loved the fact that Cruz was willing to commit to those strikes, but still constantly changing angles after connecting. I don't think I can recall one instance of Dominic Cruz, off the top of my head, of Dominic Cruz coming in and kind of pulling straight back on the same line on which he had entered, and no others.
Yeah. This was, I mean, I hesitate to call it this, but I think this was about as close to a flawless performance as you're going to find from a guy.
Yeah.
Where he knows exactly what his opponent's going to do. He's prepared for exactly what his opponent's going to do. And he has made marked improvements, even from his last fight against Dillashaw. There were things that he did better in this fight than he did against Dillashaw.
Like what? What do you think?
I think that his understanding of spacing and distance is constantly improving. I think that he was more efficient than ever in terms of his use of that space. He was never more than one step away from being able to hit Faber the whole fight with something. He was never so far beyond his distance that Faber could take a break and relax, which is what happened a lot in their first fight. And that's partially how Cruz got himself in trouble in their first fight, or not their first fight, their second fight, was in leaping in from too far away. Mm-hmm. And so that's where those straight lines came from. And the straight lines in which Cruz found himself in trouble. It's a lot easier to come in on angles when you're that much closer, when you're a half a step or a step closer the whole time. That to me is the big difference. This is something that we've been seeing from Cruz in both the short and the long snippets that we've seen from him since the Demetrius Johnson fight. But I thought that this was the best version. Maybe I think it's possible Cruz is maybe getting a little bit slower. That maybe he is starting to feel it physically. But his understanding of the game makes him seem every bit as fast because he has less distance to cover.
And I think he's the kind of guy. He's one of those rare fighters who won't be affected by the loss of by the exit of his athletic prime the way most fighters are. I can absolutely see Dominic Cruz continuing to put on good fights, even after he can admit to himself he's not feeling like a young fighter anymore. Because he's smart. He knows what he's doing. He's obviously very smart. And very technical and I like fighters like Cruz because I say he's very technical, but we've said this about Demetrius Johnson before too. It's not really that they're perfect technicians. Dominic Cruz would upset a lot of people who are dedicated to fundamental boxing technique. Dominic Cruz would have upset me when I first started doing this. When I first started trying to break down fights and doing analysis, because I was really big on making sure that avowing guys who had great fundamentals. And Dominic Cruz, he does have those, but he loves to do things that are not fundamental. Dominic Cruz is not always in a good position to be hit. He is not always balanced. He's not always protecting himself from possible strikes. But the way that he times all of his movements and how cognizant he is of those risks is what makes him such a fantastic fighter. Because he is never, Dominic Cruz is almost never surprised by something that happens to him. And that's why he's so hard to hit. Because even when he's doing something where his feet are together, or he's stepping into or out of his stance right in the pocket, or he's overextending, he's ready to move in a different direction after landing a strike or committing to his step or whatever. He's always ready for the thing that is most likely to happen to him. And so even when it does happen to him, he's not surprised by it, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable. And I think that it works because he understands how, I think he understands in a basic way how you're supposed to do it.
Sure.
I think that he has that understanding, even if he chooses not to do that, or for whatever reason can't do it. And that's what allows him to be successful being unorthodox. I think to be a successful unorthodox fighter, you need to understand orthodoxy and how your particular brand of unorthodoxy plays against what you're supposed to do and what your opponent expects from you.
Yeah, it's like saying that Roy Jones Jr. didn't know anything about boxing. Roy Jones Jr. didn't have to do things the same way as other people, and he found a way that he liked best. But if you listen to him commentate fights and talk about fights, and if you listen to him coach fighters, he definitely knows boxing. He knows exactly what he's talking about. If you want to be a successful fighter who doesn't do things the textbook way, you still have to read the textbook. So, and that's Dominic Cruz, absolutely to a T. By the way, yet another fight where I was I was tickled once again to hear swathes of people talking about how Dominic Cruz was dead tired after the first round, and he fought another 5 brilliant rounds. He may be getting tired a little more easily than he used to, but has Dominic Cruz ever ended the first round looking fresh?
Can I hit on one of my pet peeves yet again? Because it kills me when people say this.
Is it the metronomic breathing thing?
Yeah, stop looking at what you think a fighter feels like. Judge them by what they're actually doing. Whether they look tired or not, if they're still throwing strikes, if they're still hitting takedowns, why are you focused on, well, he looks tired. If their punches start to slow, if their output drops, if they're standing there doing nothing for long periods, heaving, trying to catch a breath, then comment on it. But a fighter who you think, oh, he just took a deep breath, he must be tired. That's bullshit, and it's stupid, and stop worrying about it.
It is definitely remarkable and inhuman that Dominic Cruz can fight such a high energy, movement dependent style, even as a 135-pound man. It's pretty remarkable he can do that and not be dead tired. But we've seen him do it enough times, despite breathing hard at the end of every first round he's ever fought, to know that he can do it. So, it always tickles me because it happens every single time Dominic Cruz fights. People think, ooh, even the commentators. I think Joe Rogan said that in his last fight. I think Cruz is getting tired here. I'm like, yeah, maybe. He's never too tired. I've never seen him too tired. So,
yep.
Pretty remarkable guy. Let's take another break. We've got quite a lot of time left in the show, which is fantastic because we have a lot of things to discuss. We want to talk about Holloway, Lamas, Poirier, Green, whatever other stuff from this undercard. And there was a lot. This was a fantastic event. I'm very envious you got to see this live, Pat, because from top to bottom, this card was crazy fun. It was absolutely crazy. Maybe the dullest fight was Strickland versus Breeze, and I still thought it was a good fight. So we'll talk about those, and then, of course, our little technical tribute to Muhammad Ali at the end of the show after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. And we are back. As promised, we're going to talk about some of these undercard fights on our docket right now. We have Dustin Poirier versus Bobby Green, Max Holloway versus Ricardo Lamas, Brian Ortega versus Clay Guida, and Beneil Dariush versus James Vick. So first off, let's talk about the main card opener, lightweight matchup between Dustin Poirier, Bobby Green. Of course, Green was returning from a pretty long layoff. I think he had 3 fights scheduled over the course of the prior 2 years that he had to pull out of with injuries. I was hoping he would come back and return to form. Personally, I kind of think he did. And Dustin Poirier was just, as it turned out, a nightmare matchup for him, especially the current iteration of Dustin Poirier. What did you think of this fight, Pat?
So what stood out to me really clearly was the continuing fight-by-fight improvement in Poirier's defense, which kind of unexpectedly makes him a much better offensive fighter. Mm-hmm. He's already a monster offensively. That is, he is already a guy that you don't want to be getting hit by. Like, he's a puncher. He's got big power in his hands. He's got a lot of craft offensively in the pocket. What we continue to see from him is getting better and better defensively from fight to fight. So before, he used to rely almost exclusively on a double forearms guard. That was basically all he had as a way of avoiding his opponent's shots.
He almost never does it anymore.
Yeah, so now he puts a lot. He can still do it when he needs to. He did it against Green a little bit, but he's much more likely to try and parry shots as they're coming in. He moves his head better. He takes better small angles in the pocket to kind of take some of the sting off of shots. And what this allows him to do is exchange in layers in ways that he couldn't before. Like, he used to be able to counter, or he could lead, and maybe he would stick around, but only probably after he had gotten hit. Now he can stick around in the pocket, throw at you, throw back at you, go 3, 4, 5 layers deep in these exchanges, which he did against Green, and it just makes him that much more dangerous because you can't get away. You can't find breaks when you're fighting Dustin Poirier now. And add to that the fact how much better his clinch game has gotten too, so it doesn't get any better if you try to get inside and tie up with him. Like, he forces you to stay in the pocket with him now, and it doesn't get any better for you. Like, there is no escape from Poirier's offense. His defense enables that.
Yeah, I think I did we talk about this fight last week? I can't actually recall.
Yeah, we did. We talked a lot about Bobby Green's defense, actually.
Okay, there we go. That's right, we did. Okay, I think I mentioned last week how the one of the biggest things about Dustin Poirier 2.0 was the fact that he's no longer worried about gassing. That he's got without the dramatic weight cut at the very least, he can throw a lot of volume. But I think that your point about defense adds to that. Not only can he afford to throw a lot more punches, he can throw those punches in concert with what you're giving him better than ever before. These little side-to-side steps he takes in the pocket, he still doesn't have a ton of head movement, but he's kind of like Max Holloway in those exchanges now. In fact, holy hell, would I love to see Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier too. But he's got this kind of this weird side-to-side movement, and he's totally comfortable throwing these bombs out of either stance and shifting and changing angle as he throws them. And so not only can he throw more punches, but he's putting those punches together in ways that are absolutely confounding. I thought Green, much like Lamas did against Holloway, he did an okay job of trying to survive when he was hurt early and then sneak in some big counters to scare Poirier off, and it just didn't happen. He had a few of those shots. It was that kind of fight where I thought, okay, if Poirier gasses himself in this round, really trying to go for the kill, if Green survives, I could see him eking out a weird decision because he was fighting pretty smart. Just based on what Bobby Green is capable of doing, he was doing it pretty well. But
so in that first exchange that led to the knockdown, that led to the first of the two knockdowns, Poirier throws 4 punches at Green. And Green avoids the first 3 of them. He so he slips one. It comes up short. The second one also comes up short. The third one, Green catches on his glove. It's the 4th punch that Poirier throws that lands the 4th one, a left hand that lands flush on Green's chin and puts him down. And Green managed to recover. But that's the benefit to throwing numbers the way that Poirier can and does now. Is okay, so you take a really good, really crafty, really smart defensive fighter like Bobby Green, put him in the pocket with Poirier, and Poirier is still going to get him. Is still going to get to him. There are very few fighters above this weight or ranked above Poirier at 155 who have the kind of defensive craft that Bobby Green does. If you put Poirier in the pocket with just about anybody, he's going to land shots on them.
Yeah, they're going to have to be guys like Nurmagomedov who will completely take Poirier out of his comfort zone. And even then, I would give Dustin Poirier a fairly good shot against Nurmagomedov because I think there are a few guys who just given 30 seconds to throw punches are more dangerous.
I agree with that. I mean, I love Dustin Poirier at 155 pounds. I think he's actually being substantially underrated, and it tells you what a murderer's row of fighters there is above him.
Tell me about it. Okay, so next, since we've mentioned it a little bit already, let's talk about Max Holloway, Ricardo Lamas. This is one of the fights that I was looking forward to most. I thought this was a fantastic matchup. After throwing him to the wolves with reckless abandon early, the UFC's actually done a fairly good job of matching Max Holloway. It has resulted in a 9-fight winning streak that I think a lot of people are dissatisfied with because it hasn't led to a title shot. Personally, I think this is probably the first win that you can really give Max Holloway a well-deserved title shot off of, but I think he definitely deserves it now. And I thought Lamas was going to be the guy to really test Holloway's takedown defense. As it turned out, he also really tested his technical improvements and his ability to back off and continue to fight a measured fight even after he has an opponent hurt. Because, like I mentioned before, Lamas was getting hurt very early and very often in this fight, and he did the Robbie Lawler thing. He was very difficult to put away, and he was very difficult to even keep attacking while maintaining your defensive responsibility. He realized he wasn't going to be able to get away. He realized that if he tried to push off and circle along the cage, he was probably going to get clipped with something big, so he stood his ground, he defended what shots he could, and he gambled on big power counters to try and scare Holloway off, and it worked. He survived to the 3rd round and actually did pretty well in the 3rd round despite badly losing the first 2 frames.
Yeah, so what this highlighted to me was Holloway's intelligence.
Yeah.
So Holloway, over the past couple of years, has actually turned into a good counterpuncher. It's hard to get away with leading against Holloway without eating a couple of shots back from him.
Yeah.
So you throw at him, he's longer than you are, he's making you come forward on him. So he lands a couple of shots, cuts an angle, and gets back to safety. What Holloway was much more willing to do in this fight than he has in the past is exchange. But he doesn't exchange for no good reason in the middle of the cage. He only exchanged with Lamas when Lamas's back was to the fence, when Holloway had all the space in the world to move and Lamas's stance wasn't under him. So it made it look a little bit risky to exchange punches with a guy who hits like Ricardo Lamas can hit, who has the killer instinct that Lamas has. But Holloway did it in a rational way at a time and a place that made sense for him. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really fascinating. And also with Holloway's flurries too. Holloway only flurried on Lamas when he backed him up to the fence.
Yeah.
So if Holloway is going to maintain this high output kind of game against elite fighters, he needs to get smarter to do it, and that's exactly what he's done. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it was a beautiful display of risk management while still going for a finish. Max Holloway was still very aggressive in this fight. He actually spent a lot of it pressuring and backing Lamas into the fence, but he was intelligent in when he jumped on risks because he absolutely, at certain points in this fight, the last 10 seconds come to mind, decided, I'm not going to worry that much about defense. I'm going to go after him. I'm going to throw both hands and try to knock his head off. But he didn't do that recklessly until the last 10 seconds of the fight when I think he just thought, whatever, I've won. I may as well give him a chance and give the fans a chance to see a knockout. Prior to that, it was very measured the way that he pursued the finish. He would flurry. He would throw combinations. His 1-2 was Nate Diaz-esque, the way that he lunges in with that long 1-2 from the southpaw stance. and just constantly cracks people as they're pulling their head away with that left hand. Very scary. But when Lamas started actually throwing combinations back at him, when Lamas had that moment of clarity and thought, I'm not going to get away, I can't pick my shots and try to evade, I'm going to have to plant my feet and throw multiple punches at once, that's when Holloway, it might have ended up taking a few, but that's when he thought, okay, and pulled off and tried to create the finish again rather than continuing to force it, which I thought was brilliant.
He's a brilliant fighter, man. Like, honestly, I said this on Saturday night, and I stick by it. I think that Holloway is the best featherweight in the world. I think he beats the guys who are ranked ahead of him. I think that, I think he beats McGregor again if they fight. If McGregor can ever make 145 again, which I don't think he will. I think that Max Holloway is the best featherweight on the planet.
I think he could definitely do what Nate Diaz did to Conor McGregor. Now, the fight might be different with McGregor and a different mindset, but I think he can replicate that. And I'm trying to imagine Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo or versus Frankie Edgar or versus Chad Mendez. I can definitely see him beating all those guys. I don't know if I confidently favor him against any of them, but I can definitely see him competing. And
I would have him as about minus 160 against Chad Mendez. I just think he would outwork him, just fundamentally outwork him.
Yeah.
And I think Mendez would have a lot of trouble touching Holloway. I don't think he could take him down consistently. Edgar, I think, is a really interesting matchup, and that's the one that I think would give Holloway the most trouble out of all those guys.
More than Aldo?
I want to see what Aldo looks like against Frankie Edgar.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think Aldo would have a really hard time controlling the pace of the fight. And I think he would have some trouble with a guy as tall as Holloway.
Sure,
so
yeah, that makes sense. You know what, by the way, I forgot to mention? I just thought of it because I thought of Aldo's leg kicks. Dustin Poirier versus Bobby Green, I loved Dustin Poirier's leg kicks. I thought it was a brilliant tactic because Bobby Green, we talked last week about how he changes those he kind of changes his style based on the range, and he likes to pull away with that defensive shell trying to roll the punches. And every single time that he tried to leave the pocket in that side-on stance, Poirier chopped his legs out from under him. I thought that was a brilliant thing that didn't really catch attention because obviously Poirier's punches were so effective. But I just wanted to mention that because I forgot to say it before.
That's part of what enables Poirier's pressure, right? Is that he can cut you off with those kicks, and he isn't going to let you back straight up out of range without paying for it.
Well, and he can cut you off with his stance changes and his punches as well. I'm making a lot of probably baseless comparisons, but it does remind me of Mike Tyson, the way Tyson would pressure by changing stances in order to make it more difficult to get around his lead foot. Because wherever you moved, his lead foot would be cutting you off. Because he could just step into orthodox. Gennady Golovkin does the same thing. It's a thing that a lot of good pressure fighters do when they get really comfortable with their defense, when they get comfortable with the idea of exchanging in layers. And so, yeah, that's a brilliant thing that Dustin Poirier does. Max Holloway does it too, although he fought this entire fight in southpaw, which is kind of a new thing. I've not seen him fight that for that extended of a period in one stance that was not orthodox for some time.
He's been slowly but surely moving towards this. He fought the entire fight against Oliveira in southpaw, and he spent most of the fight with Stevens in southpaw. But he still switched more than he did in this.
Yeah, I think he's really liking the sneakiness of that open stance hook. I think he's really liking that right hook from southpaw.
He loves the check hook pivot. He loves the right hook pivot, and then then from the new angle straight left.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, two more fights to discuss then that we mentioned. Let's talk about Brian Ortega versus Clay Guida. I thought this fight was really interesting. People are still talking about this fight as if Brian Ortega was clearly losing, even though I actually believe two of the judges had it 19-19 going into round 3, and Ortega was pretty clearly winning round 3, even up to the point of the KO. So he probably would have won a decision that apparently a lot of people would have been upset with. I thought that Brian Ortega is not a great technician on the feet, and I thought he very clearly lost that first round against Clay Guida. But I think there's a really strong argument for him winning that second round, and I think he deserves us to talk about how smart his adjustments were in that fight once he actually got going. And he did talk a little bit afterward about being overawed by Clay Guida. Perhaps it played a part. We know Brian Ortega is not a great first-round fighter, whatever his reasons. But as that fight went on, I thought he did a shockingly good job of adjusting as a striker to what Clay Guida was showing him.
Yeah, I think Ortega is one of these guys who may not have had the the best training over the entire course of his career. I think he's been reasonably well trained, but I think he bears all the hallmarks of a guy who has spent a lot of time in sparring sessions, probably harder sparring sessions than they needed to be. Because of his ability to make those adjustments, I think he's got good survival instincts, and that to me has come through very clearly in his fights. He's really good at picking up on what his opponent is giving him over the course of the fight. Even when he was a much worse technical striker, even than he is now, he has been able to make those kinds of adjustments. He made those adjustments against Diego Brandao. He made those adjustments against Thiago Tavares. Yeah. Like, adjustments are Ortega's game. And he really excels at making them. Like, he finished Brandao in the third round, he finished Tavares in the third round, and now he's finished Guida in the third round. Like, he's got great cardio. He's a smart guy, and he's a guy who's got a lot of experience, it seems to me, in seeing those things live.
Yeah, I thought it was things that would just help you survive in sparring sessions. We talked about this with guys like Masvidal and Bobby Green being these kind of survivalist journeymen. Brian Ortega kind of has a journeyman flavor with a different intent. He's a mean journeyman. He has figured out how to survive, but he still loves to go for the finish, and sees that as the ultimate goal no matter what kind of fight he's in. But he did things like those guys. His jabs, I thought, were pretty wonderful. I was really, really impressed by how accurate he was with his jabs as that fight went on and how he used them. Brian Ortega started that fight leaping back in straight lines a lot. He started that fight coming in on straight lines. That's why he got tagged by that overhand right and the left hook from Clay Guida so early in the fight. But he was angling off of that jab really nicely as the fight wore on. He was doing a really good job of stepping in with it and moving to the side. And you have to give him credit for just his, what appears to be, well, maybe not natural, maybe it's learned from sparring sessions, his ability to key in on where his opponent's going to be with his strikes. He puts his shots out there with maybe not thought, but feel behind them. He knows or feels where to put his strikes, and so Clay Guida has never been an easy guy to track down. It's that more than his chin, because we've seen him dropped plenty of times, is the reason for his record of basically having never been finished up until the Chad Mendes fight, having never been knocked out. And now, even if he's a little slower and everything and maybe a little more fragile, Brian Ortega still has the honor of being the second man to knock Clay Guida out with a very clean, very well-timed shot.
I mean, Ortega is a really, really dynamic and really talented guy. I think if we didn't realize that before, we should have realized it now. Like, he is... I'm not going to say that he's like a future champion type of dude, but there is a ton of talent behind it. Yeah. I think I liked what you pointed out about his jab. There was a lot of craft to the way that he was using that, even if he's not that experienced a fighter. And that bodes really well.
Yeah.
That, like, he's going to get better defensively. He's going to add more tools. He's going to become a better wrestler as the years go on. He's already a better wrestler than he was when he started in the UFC. Like, he's going to get better. And if you're looking based on what we've seen to this point, that's really promising. There's a lot to like there.
Yeah, and who knows? He's 25. The things that he showed against Guida, who was a very tough opponent, are kind of the things that I thought were so impressive from a young Max Holloway when he was fighting Dennis Bermudez. So who knows? Brian Ortega could be the kind of guy to transcend the inconsistent action fighter mold he seems to be cut out for, because that adaptability is a really strong thing to have in his back pocket. And finally, let's just spare a few words for Beneil Dariush versus James Vick. I'm sure it felt good to you watching live, Pat, to see Benny Dariush get such an emphatic victory. James Vick did not look like he ever had a chance, despite connecting with two of the finest eye pokes of his already illustrious eye poking career.
Oh my God. I just I am so viscerally angered at this point by Vic's eye poking game and by referee Mike Beltran, he of the glorious mustache. He didn't even warn Vic. He didn't say, if you do it again, I'm going to take a point, even after the second one.
Yeah,
he warned Dariush, and he said, you don't poke him in the eye either. But he didn't actually tell Vic, I'm going to take a point. What the fuck do you have to do? If you're Mike Beltran, you should know that Vic has poked each of his last 4 opponents in the eye at some point in the fight. You didn't talk to him about it beforehand. You didn't warn him over the course of the fight. You saw him do it twice. Again, what needs to happen for you to address this issue?
Pat, I don't think you understand how long it takes to braid a mustache beard combo that is 6 feet long. It takes a long time. Do you think he has time to watch these fights and figure out what the fouling tendencies of his wards are?
Jesus, man. I mean, yes. I mean, I appreciate your point here. But at any rate, I think Dariush came out like he came out like a killer here. There was no doubt about what he wanted to do to James Vick. He was going to finish him. He was going to do it as nastily and as violently as possible. I think that is the most Dariush has ever looked like a Rafael Cordero trained fighter.
Sure, yeah, that's a very good point. He looked like Rafael dos Anjos. He looked like a mean, angry, pressuring southpaw who really wanted to take a guy out. He did some weird things. He kept going for clinch knees, which I don't really understand, against a really tall guy in James Vick. But I thought the way that he was separating and creating space for those right hands and preventing Vick from tying him up after Vick was badly hurt pretty early in the fight, pretty brilliant. It was actually really reminiscent of the final left hand that Michael Bisping landed on Luke Rockhold, where he kind of framed and pushed himself back to keep the injured fighter from tying him up and surviving or recovering.
I think that Dariush is a really excellent clinch fighter in general, and I think that he thought if he got into that range with a hurt James Vick, that he could pull his head all the way down.
Sure.
Vick, I don't think, is a super technical clinch fighter. He relies a lot on his raw height in those in those spaces, and I think Dariush thought, if I can just yank his head a little bit further down, and you saw the way that Dariush was trying to do it was with a really nice frame. It was a really nice technical frame that he had there. I think he thought, I can land 3-4 knees on this guy and put him out.
Yeah, he did, by the way, come across very well in the post-fight interview. I mean, I think if you didn't know that Beneil Dariush was a smart fighter beforehand, he very clearly belongs on the list with guys like Demetrius Johnson and Dominic Cruz. Not on their level athletically, not necessarily on their level technically, but he clearly has the intellectual capacity to know exactly what he needs to do to beat any opponent on any given day. And so that's why he's looked so fantastic, even if he's been a little fragile and not super consistent with his fight-winning tactics. He hasn't been the most dynamic fighter. He has looked good in basically every single fight he's had in the UFC.
Yep, I'm with that. So should we talk a little bit about Muhammad Ali?
Let's do it. The tone of the show has been coming down. I've just been bumming myself out the whole time because, like I said, I usually think it feels kind of silly to me when people get really upset about celebrity deaths. It probably sounds really callous because I'm sure a lot of people are badly affected this year by some of their favorite celebrities dying. We've got Alan Rickman, David Bowie, and who else passed away this year? Prince, of course. So, a lot of people were really torn up by those. To me, I see that happen, and I'm like, I like their music. I like their movies. It sucks, but I'm not that sad about it. But maybe it's just because those kind of art forms aren't as important to me as they are to those other people. To me, Muhammad Ali is a pretty big deal. And so I was really, really bummed out when I heard that he had passed away. I don't know about you, Pat. Did it affect you at all in an emotional way?
Yeah, I think so, because not so much for Ali as the boxer, but Ali as a political figure, and Ali as somebody who, to me, represents the intersection of everything important about sports with the rest of the world.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not even all that concerned about Ali, about what Ali did in the ring. It was what Ali has represented, and the way that he, as a person, represents an implicit argument for the importance of sports and culture and society more generally. That's why Ali's death matters to me. But of course, he's an awesome boxer too. I'm watching him in the background right now. His first fight with Sonny Liston, amazing.
Oh my god!
Like the way he stuck and moved around the ring, his head movement, that jab, my God, like, oh God, you got to love Muhammad Ali as a boxer.
Yeah, I think, there are other people better suited to talk about Muhammad Ali, the man, the humanitarian, the complicated man, not necessarily a great man in all things that he did. Not necessarily a good man, I should say. He was great in everything. He was so influential and such a powerful figure. And at the end of his life, I don't think there were many people on earth who didn't love Muhammad Ali. But I think he showed how important an athlete can be as a person and how important a sport can be to a culture. And so I do think a great way to celebrate Muhammad Ali's life is to watch some of his best fights, to see some of the other titans of heavyweight boxing in the 60s and 70s that he competed with, because it really was probably the strongest era of heavyweight boxers ever. And Muhammad Ali almost dominated. He dominated most of his fights and struggled with a few of the other best heavyweight boxers of all time. I think if you watch Muhammad Ali, you watch some of his fights, at the George Foreman fight, the first and third fights with Joe Frazier, you watch his fight with Cleveland Williams. If you want to see him absolutely destroy somebody, you watch his first fight with Sonny Liston. You watch his first fight with Jerry Quarry, where he comes back from a 3-year retirement and just destroys Jerry Quarry. You watch his fight with Zora Fali. There's a lot of fights out there on Ali's resume that are brilliant. And while you watch them, maybe Pat and I can talk for just a couple minutes of what things to look for and why Muhammad Ali was, in addition to being such an interesting and influential human being, was such a fantastic boxer. The first thing that stands out to me is, as many people probably know, Muhammad Ali was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and which they mispronounced repeatedly as Louisville, which everyone always does. But if you're from this area, you know it's Louisville. And Muhammad went, after coming up as a young amateur boxer in Louisville, to Miami to work with Angelo Dundee. And if you know anything about Miami, you know that there's a lot of Cubans there. And Angelo Dundee's gym in Cuba in Miami was a big source of great Cuban American professional boxers. And that was kind of where Ali got the thing that made him Ali in so many people's eyes, especially Ali in his prime in the 60s, before his layoff and his legal troubles after he had to rescind the belt. Ali's style was kind of a cribbed Cuban boxing style. If you watch a lot of great Cuban fighters, like for example, another fighter trained by Angelo Dundee, who worked with Dundee, was Luis Manuel Rodriguez, El Feo, the ugly Luis Manuel Rodriguez, whose style was far more beautiful than his nickname suggests. And I think Ali very likely admired him in the gym. And Rodriguez had this, like most great Cuban boxers, this great technical footwork and but combined with kind of a Caribbean rhythm. You know, he had a rhythm to his movement, and he knew how to use his rhythm. And that was the thing with Ali. He didn't have all of the depth of technical footwork that these Cuban boxers he admired had. But for a heavyweight, being able to just move rhythmically the way he did was pretty mind-blowing. I think most of his most astounding fights, most of his most dominant performances, you just realize how much faster and more mobile Ali was than his opponent. I think if you watch his fight with, have you seen his fight with Cleveland Williams, Pat?
I have not.
Cleveland Williams could not get hit by the jab. He couldn't do it. Like, he could, every single time Ali threw the jab, it landed clean. And I think the thing that made that jab so great is not necessarily because it was a beautiful technical punch from Ali, but because of what he surrounded that punch with. If you watch Ali, we talk about broken rhythm a lot. There is nobody who threw off rhythm as well and as consistently as Muhammad Ali. And that's why he bounced so much. That's why he moved around and had this sort of constant tempo to his movements and liked to be on his toes, hopping back and forth, because by doing that, he would always put in your head the idea that this is the speed I move at. This is my tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, jab. And it would come between two beats or right before a beat, and it would completely throw you off. So it was so hard to get away from what Muhammad Ali wanted to do. And because he was a heavyweight, he had enough power to wear people down with that. There are a lot of boxers who've talked about Ali and said that, heavyweights hit hard and everything. You don't think as a heavyweight, having been hit hard, that Ali is hurting you until he's jabbed you away to pieces for 6 rounds. And you realize, holy hell, I'm groggy. I can barely keep on my feet. Ali would just chip away over and over and over, and because it was so hard to key in on what he was doing with his jab and his movement, it made it so difficult to time him. And then, like some of the other guys we've talked about tonight, like Dominic Cruz, Ali did a lot of wrong things from a fundamental perspective, a lot of leaning back. If you watch some of Ali's defensive highlights, he's not a Pernell Whitaker or a George Benton or a Willie Pep. He did a lot of really risky shit in the ring. And then as he slowed down, he did a lot of risky shit like relying on his chin. But he was so special for a heavyweight boxer, given what he did, that I just think, it bears keeping those things in mind and just admiring. We talk so much about how Ali transcended boxing. It's almost to the point where we forget what a great boxer he was. And he was really, really fantastic. So, that's where he got his start. He became such an influential figure because he was able to do things like that to Sonny Liston, who now is only remembered as the guy who lost to Ali and threw the second fight, most likely. But Sonny Liston's one of the greatest heavyweights ever to set foot in the ring. And Muhammad Ali, as a young kid with basically no valuable experience. I think he'd beaten Archie Moore at that point, but it was an old Archie Moore.
He beat Moore in 62, and he fought Liston for the first time about a year and a half later.
Right. So Moore was like his first big win, and Moore was very old and very slow by that time, and had never been that great as a heavyweight anyway, and was only a heavyweight at that point because he was too fat to make light heavyweight anymore. So Ali came out of nowhere. He was the Louisville Lip in a derogatory way because he talked more than he should have. And he absolutely outclassed Sonny Liston in that first fight. It's just an unbelievable achievement, and that set him on the path to be the great man that he became. So, I would say watch that fight. Do you have any recommendations, favorite Ali fights of yours, Pat, that people should study if they want to appreciate his boxing skill?
I think the first Liston fight to me is just a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece of a fight. I think obviously the Rumble in the Jungle is an essential one. But like to me, what stands out the most about him is the way that he used the space of the ring, and used it in very precise ways. Like so, the way that and to different purposes at different points in his career too. I mean, like people talk a lot about the rope-a-dope, but against Liston, the way when Liston was trying to pressure him, that Ali could just feel where the ring ropes were. Felt it in a way that very, very few fighters, except for maybe very few guys, have ever felt the ropes that way, and been able to play with that space in really tiny, precise, specific increments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I look for. I don't know. We'll miss him. He was a great man by any metric. It's sad. He's one of those few cultural icons that everybody recognized, that everybody knew. Yeah,
absolutely. I think Ali is the kind of guy you could go to a random village in any country in the world and show them a picture of Muhammad Ali, and they would know his name. They'd know who he was. They might even be able to give you a few like broken English quotes of his because he was such an enduring figure and one of the smartest and most strategically sound fighters as well. I think that's why people are very keen to be contrarian with great boxers these days. They like to be like, oh, well, so-and-so would have lost to so-and-so. This great fighter is not actually that great. You can look at Muhammad Ali and pick apart what he did technically over and over. But it bears remembering Muhammad Ali never once lost a rematch. He had some close calls, especially with Ken Norton, who I think was just all wrong for him stylistically. But he never actually lost a rematch. He never did worse in a rematch than he did in the first fight with a guy, and he rarely lost a first fight. So you could maybe capitalize on what Ali did wrong, but you'd never capitalize on what he did twice the same way. So I think Muhammad Ali, a smart man, that's why he was able to do so much in the ring and so much outside of it. We will miss him, but it's a good opportunity to go back and celebrate what made him so great in the first place, and then remember what he went on to after that. And I thought UFC 199, for me personally, a really, really fun way to end a day of kind of just missing the legacy of Ali. It's good to remember that combat sports, sports in general, but for me personally, combat sports can still inspire you and make you giddy and drive you crazy like few other things in the world can. And 199 was one of those kind of events, probably more so for you, Pat, being there live.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was totally, completely insane. It was a great night. It was everything you hope for as a fan and an observer of the sport.
Yeah, and we hope you guys enjoyed it just as much as we did. You can find us on social media if you want to ask us questions. Next episode, we'll probably try and do some heavy bag questions. It's been 2 episodes now since we have answered any. So send those to us on Twitter with the hashtag heavybagquestions. You can find me at BoxingBush, B-U-S-C-H. Pat is at Patrick_Wyman. And of course, if you want a guaranteed question answered on the show or even a full 20-minute segment topic of your choice, you can check us out on Patreon. Consider pledging to support the show. We appreciate it, and we're happy to give you all of the fight talk that you continue. We hope you continue to enjoy. Anyway, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.